Welcome. My name is Clara Kostel. I work for the Austrian Commission for UNESCO, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you here to our event, AI and Creativity. And without further ado, I'm happy to hand over to our hostess for tonight, Alexandra Grabner from the Angewandte Interdisciplinary Lab.
Hello and good evening here in the Angewandte Interdisciplinary Lab and in the Otto Wagner Postsparkasse. We are a platform for art, sciences and artistic research. And since 2014, we have been serving as this platform here as part of the University of Applied Arts Vienna. And since 2021, we have the honor to use this amazing space for our events and our exhibitions in the left and the right space. And yeah, so thank you for coming here tonight. And I'm very, very glad that UNESCO and EDUCULT came to us with the idea to do this event here in our space, because also for the University of Applied Arts, artificial intelligence is a topic that we're discussing on so many levels. So thank you very much for coming, and yeah, have good conversations and a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you. And now please welcome to stage Anke Schatz-Spindler, one of the collaborators from EDUCULT, please.
Thank you very much, and very good evening to everyone. So this is actually the third event in a series of events that we co-hosted with UNESCO and Diplomatische Akademie. The first event started very much in the cultural sphere, where we discussed memory and identity and also freedom of speech and limitations when it comes to violations of human rights. The second event gathered young perspectives, and it was very good to have the Diplomatische Akademie as a space where students are very much involved in discussions. We also had the UNESCO youth representative and an activist who talked about memes as forms of cultural expressions that young people, digital natives, explore. And this third event is very much about gathering expert and civil society perspectives on the perspectives of AI, the use of AI, the limitations of AI. And I'm curious to learn more tonight, and has been so inspiring so far. So yeah, welcome everyone, and I hope we have a space also where people can raise their voice and express their worries, perspectives, but also optimism maybe about the use of AI tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anke Schatz-Spindler. Now, me welcome you again for on behalf of the Austrian Commission for UNESCO. I want to raise your upon your attention to the fact that there's someone filming and there's a photographer. Only the panel discussion will be filmed, but if you ask a question during the Q&A, your voice will be recorded in the filming, so please be aware of that. And if you don't want to be portrayed in the photos that we're going to publish on our website and social medias, please come up to one of our colleagues to share that info. Also, I want to point your attention to the Austrian Sign Language translation that we have tonight, which I'm really thankful to Karin Moser and Cornelia Rosenkrantz for their support. Thank you so much. We at the Austrian Commission for UNESCO, I want to point out, we stand against all forms of isms, racism, sexism, and I would ask you as guests, as panelists, to really engage with the other guest colleagues with respect and an open ear. I wanted to also share that. And many thanks to our financial supporters of this evening. I want to say thank you to the City of Vienna, as well as the Ministry for Housing, Arts and Culture, Public Service and Sports. Thank you so much. Why UNESCO? Why another event on AI? I wanted to quickly mention why we're doing this, and the interplay between culture and AI is not a recent phenomenon. We know that since the emergence of Gen AI, of generative AI, new discussions have been started. It's been a turning point, and there's been a new report published by UNESCO on culture and AI, where all the challenges and opportunities that I'm not going to name, we're going to discuss them in the panel, are also presented. And I want to find your attention that the report will also be presented at the Art Tech Summit in 2 weeks. So UNESCO in this whole discussion has had a pioneering role. In 2021, the recommendation on ethics of AI has been adopted, which has been a leading normative instrument, and since then the discussions are going on. Many normative instruments have been worked on. Nevertheless, significant gaps do remain, which is why we're here tonight, and we want to hear from our panelists, we want to hear from you. And without further ado, I'm gonna quickly point to the schedule of tonight. So first we're gonna have a conversation between Clemens Apprich and Magdalena Reiter, moderated by General Secretary of the Austrian Commission for UNESCO, and afterwards a panel discussion moderated by dear colleague from Diplomatische Akademie, Giulia Pelillo, with Eva Fischer, Sofia Braga, Ali Nikrang, and Carina Zehetmair. And after that panel, we'll have a Q&A, as well as drinks and snacks for you to enjoy and engage in exchange and conversation. So that was my part for now, and I'm happy to welcome to the stage Martin Fritz, General Secretary of the Austrian Commission for UNESCO. Please give a hand to Martin Fritz.
Okay. Thank you very much, Clara Kostal. As the moderator of the table, I want to please ask Clemens Apprich and Magdalena Reiter to join me, and then we'll sit down, fill our glasses with water, and I'll start with the introductions. Thanks. It has been mentioned why we're here and why the Austrian Commission for UNESCO has a vivid interest in questions of AI, but of course in questions of art, culture, and creativity in general. Basically speaking, we all take pride in what Clara mentioned, that UNESCO, with its recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence in 2021, was among the first internationally agreed upon, let's say, not regulatory in the legal sense, but in the international law scene, a soft law sense, with this recommendation. On the other hand, we celebrate the 20th birth anniversary of the Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. And these two themes, if you will, we want to combine tonight by focusing on how can the diversity of cultural expressions be guaranteed, safeguarded, and promoted in the reality of artificial intelligence as we know it, especially since the past years, where there was a certain boom in all these practices. And we will discuss that with two outstandingly informed partners. I want to introduce Magdalena Reiter. And Magdalena Reiter's work is, and I quote, characterized by a passion for connecting the fields of media and technology, art and culture, education and self-empowerment, as well as a deep conviction, and that I think we will start to discuss right away, a deep conviction that openness and transparency make our society better. She headed the municipal initiative Open Commons in Linz, where she was involved in publishing the data sets of the city of Linz as open data sets. She is a founding member of Netzpolitischer Abend Österreich, so there's also an activist part of her work. She was also a member of the advisory board of UNESCO City of Media Arts of the city of Linz. Welcome, Magdalena Reiter. Clemens Apprich, at least for those who join us tonight from Angewandte, he's quite well known here in the house as the current Vice Rector for Research and Digitality at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. He is head of the Department of Media Theory, as well as of the Peter Weibel Research Institute for Digital Cultures at the university, which of course goes back to the long tradition of media arts at Angewandte, originated by many people, but most prominently by Peter Weibel. He holds the professorship for media theory and history since 2021, and I think it's remarkable he studied philosophy, political science, cultural history, and theory. So we're not looking at it from a purely technical perspective, more from an approach which I think is necessary to when we talk about ethical and diverse use of these technologies. His current research deals with filter algorithms and their application in data analysis, and I will skip a few lines. Currently, he's working on a new book about animated intelligence, which is forthcoming at Amsterdam University Press. So, as I said, we're looking at two major texts where UNESCO is concerned with the diversity of cultural expressions and with the ethical use of AI. And just to quote from one of these texts, from the recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence, the recommendation, as most of UNESCO's papers, is publicly available for easy download. It comprises also political policy advice, policy recommendations organized by policy areas. And in the field of culture, among other recommendations, we read, member states should engage technology companies and other stakeholders, us, you, and other stakeholders to promote a diverse supply of and plural access to cultural expressions, and in particular to ensure that algorithmic recommendation enhances the visibility and discoverability of local content. So I think a remarkably clear recommendation asking member states and all of the stakeholders within a member state to work on the diversity of cultural expressions also in the digital realm. We have discussed this based, among others, on an analysis by Magdalena Reiter, which focused on not so much on the question of payment and copyright, things that we are aware of, that they're important in this context, but tonight the focus is more on how can we even approach diversity in these technologies, in these media. And I want to start with asking Magdalena to give us a brief idea of the key notions of your analysis in regards to the protection and promotion of cultural diversity.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Well, and also thank you for letting me analyze the status quo from my perspective. As you mentioned, Martin, I have a deep passion for digital openness because I think it's how the internet as our leading medium works in a way. Nevertheless, of course, copyright is very important. On the other hand, it was very nice to talk without copyright, without this very, very important topic about diversity. The two topics are woven together, but it opens up the mind if we don't always talk about copyright. So in this analysis, I was focusing on how, for example, opening metadata can help produce more visibility for artists. There are a lot of metadata in our Austrian institutions, for example, in museums or in universities, metadata about works, about artistic works, about artists. And if we open up this metadata, if we structure them in linked open data, we can have a very different view on how we see cultural work, or how we see artists, how we see networks around artists, around art, because we can see them in a very different angle. For example, if we have metadata open up from our museums, our Austrian museums, we can also see where, for example, Austrian artworks are traveling, if they are switching places, or which trends are adopted in which areas. So I think this is something important for the future that we should consider. Also, of course, diversity is something that we have to bring into our algorithms. For example, I was talking about a public broadcasting archive from Netherlands that is organizing itself not by the click rate, but it makes also content visible that is made by marginalized groups. And those kind of operations, those kind of things we need to use much more in the future. We have to think about how we structure our knowledge, of course, and also how we can make it possible to be visible.
Clemens Apprich, you, of course, wear many hats, so you can somehow choose whether you answer as the vice rector of an eminent institution, which also teaches and needs to work with the production also of students and your own production, or if you want to answer as a theorist in more general terms. But where do you see the current moment, especially related to this? Magdalena talks, links us back to the history of a certain, let's say, hope about openness, about sharing open data, a basically freely accessible internet. So where do you see the current moment, and then where are the chances, but where are the threats, and how do you see them, especially from where you look at them in your work?
Yeah, thanks. Also, thanks for the invitation and for the question, right? I mean, you gave away my magic trick now, because I can always evade the question by saying now this perspective, right? I think, I mean, in a sense, we're kind of repeating history all the time, basically, right? A lot of the debates we have, if you remember, in the 90s, is like when the internet, became like a mass medium with the World Wide Web. We see different similar things, right? In terms, I guess we can learn also from here that openness, in a sense, was kind of like also an ethics and a thing to go, but sometimes politically or tactically it didn't help, right? Because in the beginning, kind of especially also in Vienna, there was like a very vibrant scene of net cultures, which was maybe for 4 or 5 years. But then immediately it got taken over by, kind of like commercial internet providers, but also then on a bigger scale, by especially US American companies. But what I also see in here by the repeating this kind of thing, and that's maybe then the more philosophical, answer to this is, I guess what AI differs a little bit, that we really see, I think, a remediation between the past, the present, and the future. And that can be frightening in a lot of ways, but I think it opens up also a lot of things, right? Because you can see that basically what we have now, and it's not, I guess I'm repeating that so the people who know this, AI for me, and you shouldn't record this, but it's a rather bullshit term, right? Because any intelligence is artificial. It was always when you use scripture, whatever it is, right? But we're talking about database systems. So basically what we have is the gist, if you want, is the data. And the interesting thing, we're talking about data from the past, usually, right? There's also Claudia Lache here, we'll talk later, right, who does artistic practices on this. Because the idea is there's a big problem that we have right now on the algorithms and the models we're using. They're actually calculating the data from the past to extract a future scenario, so it's predicting, and then applying it to the future. But the problem that happens then is you're foreclosing the future by this, because you're projecting the past to the future, right? And what you're doing exactly what it should happen by analyzing the past to intervene in the present to hopefully then change the future. And I think this is the crucial moment we are in. There's also a possibility to say, like, and I'll make this more concrete, we can also use these technologies and these massive data sets, and as you said, right, we should open them also from institutions and so on the metadata to analyze the past in order to then find a political, social, whatever it is, question answer to this, right? But not automate the process in order to foreclose our own futures. And I think this is something where universities, institutions, you said, all the stakeholders could, artists especially, because they really have like very good techniques and also tools to work with this, to see like what is problematic in the past, what are these kind of like patterns in the past from which we can learn, hopefully to then do something different in the future, and not just simulate in order to do the same again and again and again. And I think there's a big opportunity here.
It's an interesting point, Magdalena. Do you want to reply immediately about this, relationship of the past, which is then the basis, which lies open, versus the unknown, opaque future in a way?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there are too much hopes in AI if we want to see our futures in it. I think it's a tool, and it's used in so many different ways at the moment, and in certain areas it's very, very powerful, but I don't think that it is something that helps us to shut down our brains. Of course not. I think that we are at the moment at a certain point where some people think that it is some superpower because they haven't used it heavily enough, and some used it already really well, and they know already the limits maybe. And I don't know, for example, the generative AI, text producing AI, I used it already quite a lot, and I know very much the limits of it, and I'm not thinking of it that it is something that can take my work, but it just helps me a bit, it supports me a bit. And I'm sure when my daughters are adults, they don't think that the system is the thing that is doing the creativity, but it's only a tool, so I'm sure that it will support us, and I'm sure that we need some new regulations, maybe some new rules for using it, but I don't have the hope that it will actually be, I don't know, something to look at our futures, yeah.
We will find out what is the optimistic and what is the pessimistic side of these arguments, but directly asking, do you go to students and say, don't worry, it's just a tool, use it, do whatever you want? Or from a teaching perspective, when you say, okay, we need to keep future open in a way and not just recycle, what do you do? I mean, what do you do faced with your responsibility in creating future expressions?
I mean, also here at the other hat now, right?
Concretely here,
No. So the media historian would say, again, the wheel has not, it's kind of like being reinvented every time. So what I'm saying is just that, the tools, what they are used is projecting the future, right? But I think that the idea is if you analyze the past, you can kind of like directly intervene in the present, and then you come to teaching, right? And I think one of the beautiful things being at an art school, and I've been to different institutions, is to take the arts very serious here, right? Also the knowledge that is kind of like within the arts, not as this kind of like, oh, then at the end of the day there's an exhibition, right? And the whole thing already happened. So when we think about, for me, I have to kind of like repeat this, but also AI for me, I hope, I'm pretty sure in 5 years, nobody will talk about AI anymore as a term. It's just like, it's one of these hype phenomenons, but we will be stuck with data, basically. Data is a new material, right? So the two things, especially at an art institution, that interests us in a sense for all the things, when the Angewandte in a sense, but also the other institutions like the Museum for Applied Arts here was founded 150 years ago. The interesting thing is it was a direct response to the first industrial revolution. You can see it by Eitelberger when he invented these kind of things, that he said, basically we have the industrial revolution now, but we are not happy with the outcome. But the promise was not to go pre-industrial revolution to the crafts or whatever, that's sometimes also in there, but to say like, and let's now rethink what is happening here and rethink the concepts and apply it also to a different future if you want, right? Also for more people in a more functional way and so on. 150 years later, we have the fourth industrial revolution, which is based on data, basically. I think we are all not very happy with the outcome, right? So why not getting back to this idea about the Wiener Werkstätten, basically, this idea, and really go into this kind of idea and think about data as a workshop, as a material from an artistic and also the philosophical side, and rethink the whole concept, right? First of all, small scale. It's not about competing against Silicon Valley. No one cares, right? But really on a small scale, thinking about what we can do with this as a data practice. That's the one thing. And the other thing where I'm really serious, and people, I don't know, who in the lecture have a lecture on analog digital cultures, where I'm always starting by, what do you mean? So what do you mean? What do you think the digital basically is? And then, it's kind of like computer, the screen, you're always there, somebody. But the digital is like the oldest cultural technique we have. It's everything that you count for, right? It's something you make discrete. And then we discuss this. If you ask a painter about discrete medium or perspective or whatever it is, they know a lot about things when it comes to machine learning and vector spaces. And this kind of knowledge we haven't even touched yet, right? And it's not something I throw into, the golem of, the kind of like Silicon Valley Saurons to prove all these kind of things. But the interesting thing is, how can we do this small scale and really work on this, right? Because this is like knowledge we have been using for thousands of years, and I think it will also like lead us to the future. Then maybe.
But what do we need for that? Also in terms of infrastructure, how can cultural workers have agency or regain agency? So what do you need in your work? Clemens Apprich can command maybe the resources of a large institution. You're an independent cultural worker. What is it that you are confronted with, or that you ask for? I would say on a policy level or on an infrastructural, legal level.
I just wanted to say this answer is giving. This is the kind of answer that is giving me hope, because I also do think that artists should work with data, with databases, with algorithms. They should experiment. They should analyze. They should talk loudly about everything. And yes. Then there is this parallel world out of the university, of the art university, where we also have to think about remuneration and so on. But I would like to have more of these spaces where artists or cultural workers are allowed to think about it. And I think that is something that we have to focus on for the next decades, because there will be artists and cultural workers then that have no work anymore. It's like that. There will be less jobs that are paid. I'm sure about it, but still we need.
You say that in a space of education and formation of students. So who will not have the jobs?
I hope that artists will have jobs. So let's focus on that. We need we need also people who invent new things, who see structures that are that make sense, who can think in the future, and then afterwards we can feed the algorithms with it. But we need those people, and we need their ideas, and we need spaces where it is possible.
And what is needed again in terms of if we look at the commercial monopolies, for example, like, do you now sit in the rectorate and you have to decide whether or not you have 100,000 euro or 200,000 euro for licenses or big engines, big computing power, or how can a university, for example, contribute to access to this kind of plurality of and ease of access in these terms? Or are you already, let's say, a slave to the bigger tech machines?
In a certain way, yes. I mean, we are all part of this kind of like game, right? But as an now head institution again, right? This is like, again, that's already like the magic trick here. I think I'm very happy, right, that the Angewandte has its own kind of like content system, but also that the teaching platform and all the kind of like the cloud-based systems and so on, it's all in an open source basis. So I think we're the only one who's completely in that sense, have this autonomy, so that's kind of like a good thing. Of course, it also takes time. We have the base Angewandte, their own development team, to kind of like also code these applications if we need it. What is happening right now, and I mean, not hurting any feelings, right? But I'm really at the beginning here. I mean, some people, I see Margarete Jamann, right? Some people are like further in a sense. But I think an interesting debate that we have right now is, how can we really understand data? And for me, it's really about data as this material, right? I'm serious about this, whatever AI is. But how can we convince us an institution like this that we are, as you said, sitting on a real treasure of data, right? Not in a quantitative sense, not in terms of, commercial applications, but this is the question that we have also from the history, but also current production. And that becomes a bit tricky, because if you ask somebody in photography, what is your datum, right? We're just at the beginning of the debate, right? I have it, of course, being a part of the Rectorate. I'm also like part of the, it's called the UNICO, so it's like the association of all the other universities, right? And then, of course, you're also discussing with people from technical universities. But here, the debate from the arts is kind of like completely new in a sense, right? Of course, somebody in physics has more an understanding what the data is, the kind of like research data, right? But what is it for the arts? And bringing this in and trying to also convince the other ones that this is an important debate to have. And now I'm going into philosophy, because it's not very clear what the data actually is, right? People really think sometimes, that data just rains from the sky, right? It's this term that we have, like raw data, right? There is no raw data. Data is always produced, it's always cooked, it's discretized, it's digitized, right? You have to extract it. If you take data from the weather stations, you need to say, is this Celsius or using Fahrenheit? You're kind of like producing the data for specific purposes, right? And all these assumptions are already going into this process, and they are, if you talk about AI and machine learning, they are building the models, right? These pre-assumptions that are always hidden in the process. And this is very important. This is why you see facial recognition software being discriminatory against non-white people, for example, because this is how the data is produced in a sense, right? And now I think, I'm not the artist, so I was like /3 for that, right? But I think the arts was always great in reflecting its own means of production. And if we can take this knowledge that in the process, by redoing it a bit, by doing it differently and reflecting what is going on in this data normalization process, in the data production process, then I think we touch something, right? And convincing the university here, this is like what I'm interested in. And not so much, again, we have our own sources to become more concrete. Yes, then we need our own servers. We have that. As universities, we now agreed on to have our own kind of like infrastructure, right? But I don't need much computing power, to be honest, for these smaller things at the moment, right? It's not the big question of resources. It's more about commitment.
Okay. Magdalena.
And adding to the data, we also need like an open infrastructure or open models, European models that are secure, models that are fair. So what we've been talking also today was investing in European alternatives that also help us use the data and use it wisely, have also power to see which data we want to use and which we don't add to models, because it will be really, really important to curate data.
And what is, I'll stay with you for the moment, what is the most urgent thing to do now? Because I'm not sure whether this is propaganda or reality, that there's always a sense of urgency in that debate. You know, some people count down the years or hours that it will take for AI to take over. Others would say, okay, we'll only take 5 years and then we'll all lose our jobs. So there's always this sense of urgency, but on the other hand, we know that this sense of urgency is also used to sell things and to make us buy or take certain decisions. But what is urgent from your perspective?
Well, this is a really hard question. I think, of course, there is a certain urgency. I know a lot of people that are losing their jobs, or they are focusing on something different than they used to for the last decades. So, yeah, of course it's an urgency, but on the other hand, we also have to, there is no need for quick actions. We have to think about it. We have to think it through, and then act wisely, I think.
Clemens, is there a sense of urgency? Also, if you think about policy, law, regulation?
I mean, the urgency, yes, right? I mean, you also know this soon. Great. Everything is urgent, right? Nowadays. Every email starts with, I know your time, you're not available, but this is very urgent, so yes. But this is like maybe kind of like your urgency. I think, just like this conviction that you don't have to reinvent the things, I guess, helps me a lot, right? Think about, again, data, right? In the sense, what would be needed in terms of policy recommendations? We just at the round table and discussed this. I think, for example, something very kind of like, a very, not maybe boring, but something like a very old idea like the social security system, right? I want to see a social security for data, right? This would be something that intrigues me, right? I even imagine a building like this, there are all the people, the clerks in there, and they are handling our data, in a sense, right? And why? Because right now what we have, and this is not only concerning the artists, but more like citizens, right? What we have now, even in the European Union, where the protection is of course higher, but it's nonetheless individualized, right? So you click your consent and so on. We all click on this, right? But why not have something like, as soon as you have a tax number, for example, your data is also like collected collectively in a collective way in the social security, and then of course there is a specific kind of process that we also know about, and then the negotiation with like bigger companies happen, right? They can still have the data, but they have to give something back for that, right? And these kind of things, I guess we can use these old institutions that we still have, and I think very good kind of like ideas of this, and apply it also to the future if you want, and these kind of ideas. That would be a policy recommendation, because I really think that in Europe, in Austria, we still have these public institutions, and we should help each other, right? As a university, but also the other ones.
This social security, which I think is very interesting, I'm not sure if it's a metaphor or a practical approach. Is it more like a health system which protects us from harm? Or is it more like a pension system where we then get something back for what we...
It's both, hopefully, right? I mean, it's not like it's only not my term. It circulates on the data trusts, for example, right? That's something, it's just like takes away the idea that we only have an individual responsibility for our data, but we have it in a collective way. And that's very interesting, because data is anyway always processed collectively, right? So this is like one of the things that you also see when you really think about algorithmic filtering and so on. All these companies from Instagram, whatever the recommendation systems are, they're not interested in your individual data, right? They don't care about your, holiday pictures, right? That might sound a bit harsh, but it is, right? But they're interested in who is then liking the picture, right? Who is the collectivity behind it? How can I calculate this? So the one way to respond is also by collectivity. And I think this is the important thing, right? But this individualization, which is always happening here, that you are the user, which is the basic word of this, right? You're using something on an individual basis. I think this is flawed. So in the policy thing, we have to also respond in a collective manner.
For 5 minutes that we still have, we want to go back to the diversity of cultural expressions. And, I quote the language so that we can also, introduce this kind of idealistic approach to these issues. I mean, what are the objectives, for example, of a UNESCO convention to protect and promote the diversity of cultural expressions? I'd quote just a few: to encourage dialogue among cultures, to foster interculturality in order to develop cultural interaction in the spirit of building bridges among people, to promote respect for the diversity of cultural expressions and raise awareness of its value at the local, national, and international levels. Can you go back to art, culture, diversity of expressions for this last round? What is it that you think you can contribute to make sure that we do not narrow down the diversity of expressions? Because in one of the discussions we had somebody from an Austrian university said he seems to see already a narrowing down of expressions in the writing styles, maybe in some of the visual styles, but it was more an assumption. It was not an empirical study. So what can you contribute that this will still be wide and open?
Yeah. I think that we have also to focus on not only on AI but on the structures that we already have implemented. For example, we are already creating artists. We are creating point of views, and we have to check: are they diverse? Because if they aren't, then AI cannot make them more diverse. It can just repeat it. So that would be the very first step to check on those structures that we are already having, and then, of course, implement it in the digital world as well. For example.
And is there something concrete that you are currently, let's say, pursuing
towards
that goal?
Yeah.
That you want to promote?
Yeah. For example, I'm coming back to the metadata. For example, if we are having giving a public prizes away, or if museums are curating and so on and so forth, those data would be really a treasure if we could open it, and it makes a visibility, and it's kind of a currency for artists to have this openly available. So that would be one thing. Yeah.
So, Clemens Apprich, tomorrow morning, what will be your first, step to further guaranteeing the diversity?
I mean, there are many things, right? I mean, because this is like the last one, so maybe broader. I think education, I mean, that's, wow, we kind of get the university, right? Education is one of the things. I will make it kind of like more abstract and then more concrete. I think we focus a lot about educating humans, right, people and so on, but I think, and this is going back really to Alan Turing if you want, we also need to educate the machines. And ideally, we managed in the future, if you want this, to find a way to educate humans and machines together. Now, this is not very kind of like insane, but we always develop together. If you think about humankind, we are technological beings at the same time. This is what you call a technogenesis, right? We always emerged together with, scriptures, with all these kind of things, right? We produce this. So yes, if like some students are now kind of like generating generic content, right? That is part of the process, but then something new opens up, right? Also, text production was for a long time very bad, so now it's maybe liberating itself. There's a lot of hope, because when you think about also from media history around 1900, when it became really popular, photography, it was of course invented before, but one of the discourses was actually, and now it's killing the arts, especially kind of like the fine arts and painting, right? But what happened in a sense is really that it liberated the fine arts from the central perspective idea, right? And it became all of a sudden more abstract. It found new ways of expression, and I find this very interesting that we will see similar things when you talk about text production, right? I don't find a very creative way in writing, 100 emails per day, right? I would be very happy if this is automated, right? And in the background, the appointments are made. Why not? Having more time. Concretely, one of the things that is also in this institution is pedagogy also means on a more kind of like fundamental level, right? And this is something I'm concerned, or like really concerned about, is when you think about kindergartens and primary school, especially also in Austria, right? Mm-hmm. Right now, the approach is basically to say like, this is the literacy, here you have a tablet, there's a game, play it until you have 100 points, that's it, right? But I don't think that this is the right approach, because you're already sucked into the medium, right? Mm-hmm. But what it's needed, and allow me this, when the inventor of kindergarten, Fröbel, invented this Spielgarten. We all made this. This little, kind of like a bowl, actually, you have to put into like a circle, right, in order to understand what abstraction is and this kind of things.
I'm afraid I need to...
Yeah, I know. And this has to be done for digital concepts, right? We need to learn these kind of things in order to liberate us and to find new ways in the connection and not repeating old concepts. And this is the important part.
Thank you very much. I think I speak for everybody. I enjoyed listening to you, and I benefited from listening to you, and I would benefit even more if I could listen to you for more time. But there is another interesting panel coming up. There is room for your questions later. This moment was for listening, for establishing a base for what's following, and the Clara Kostal will introduce what is following. Thank you very much, Magdalena Reiter and Clemens Apprich.
Thank you so much for participating in this first panel. So we now have a 10-minute technical break. Please turn around, talk to your neighbors about what you've just heard, what interests you, why you're here. Grab a glass of water or a lemonade, and we'll be back and continue with our next panel with Eva Fischer, with Carina Zehetmair, with Sofia, Braga, and with Ali Nikrang, moderated by Giulia Pelillo at 7 p.m. So see you in a bit. Thank you.
So, hello everybody, welcome back. I'm glad to see that many are still here. We are going to dive into one fascinating question in this panel, namely what happens when digital technologies don't just represent reality, but begin to remake it. And we often hear that the digital revolution has the power to help us unlearn anthropocentrism, to move beyond the human-centered worldview that has dominated modernity, and to reorganize how power and creativity are distributed. But the reality, as we know, looks rather different. Instead of decentralization, we've seen a massive concentration of power. A handful of market-dominated platforms have effectively privatized the world's creative output, the data, the images, the sounds, the words, and used it to train new systems that now speak, paint, compose, and even dream on our behalf. We live in a moment where dead celebrities are digitally resurrected, when AI-generated likenesses can make people appear to say or do things that they never did, where reality itself becomes slippery. Now, in this dense web of automation, simulation, and commodification, where do we locate creativity, ethics, and democracy? And perhaps more importantly, how do we imagine alternative futures where humans and machines can coexist without one consuming the other? Maybe, as Clemens Apprich just pointed to, maybe we can live together with educated machines. Now, this panel, Hybrid Realities, looks at the interstices, the spaces in between where creative practice, technology, and critical imagination meet. Each of our guests approaches these questions from a different angle: art, curation, research, and ethics. Together, they'll help us think about how creativity, when faced with powerful digital systems, might still open pathways toward more plural and democratic futures. So I have the pleasure now to introduce our speakers. And let me start with Sofia Braga on my right side. She's a transmedia artist and AI film director based in Vienna. Sofia's work pushes the limits of storytelling and human-machine collaboration. She explores non-human agency and transhumanism, asking how emerging technologies can generate speculative, even poetic, fabulations about what it means to be alive in the algorithmic age. Her film, The Artificial Conjuring Circle, was the first AI-generated movie shown at every festival it entered, including Academy Award qualifying festivals. She has also developed open-source AI filmmaking workflows, proving that creative experimentation and technological autonomy can go hand in hand. And just to note, OpenAI itself recognized her as one of its first alpha artists. Maybe you can tell us what it means exactly. And she recently received Austria's National AI in Art and Culture grant. Next, we have Eva Fischer, an independent curator, cultural manager, and lecturer, whose work has long connected the dots between art, technology, and immersion. Eva is the artistic director of SIVA, the Contemporary Immersive Virtual Art, Austria's leading media art festival, now in collaboration with Belvedere 21. Over the years, she has curated exhibitions and performances from Vienna to New York to Graz, Moscow, always with an eye for how digital and immersive media transform how we experience art and how institutions can adapt to these new realities. She also teaches across several Austrian universities, sharing her expertise on experimental media, immersive strategies, and the cultural management of innovation. Eva brings the curatorial and infrastructural perspective. That means how we stage, mediate, and sustain hybrid creativity. Next, we have Carina Zehetmair, an AI entrepreneur, lawyer, and human rights expert who bridges ethics, governance, and innovation. Carina is the CEO of Paper One and founder of AI Lens, helping organizations implement AI responsibly. She's also president of Women in AI Austria and a government advisor on AI policy, where she advocates for diversity, inclusion, and trustworthy AI design. Her background gives her a sharp understanding of how technology reshapes global and local power dynamics and how to embed human rights principles into AI-driven innovation. Carina's voice grounds our discussion in the question of responsibility. How do we ensure that our hybrid realities remain aligned with democratic values and social justice? And finally, we have Ali Nikrang, a composer, pianist, and AI researcher whose work sits beautiful at the intersection of music and machine intelligence. Ali works at the Ars Electronica Future Lab and is a professor of AI and musical creation at the University of Music and Performing Arts in Munich. He's developed Rector, I hope I spoke it correctly, an AI composition system that interacts with human musicians, translating artistic intuition into algorithmic collaboration. His work has been shown from the Venice Biennale to the Misalignment Museum in San Francisco, and even in concerts with the Munich Philharmonic. Ali's approach raises deep questions about how creativity means when a system can listen back, when the machine becomes a co-composer rather than a mere tool. So together, our four speakers represent a powerful constellation. We have an artist who reimages agency, a curator who mediates immersive culture, a composer who collaborates with machine, and an ethicist entrepreneur who builds frameworks for accountability. Each of them works in this interstice, in this in-between space, in the hybrid space where creativity, code, and society intersect. So with them, we'll explore not just what AI can do, but what we want it to do and what we want it to mean. How might these technologies become tools for rethinking and not reinforcing existing hierarchies? And how can art help us maybe see and feel the politics of our digital age differently? So please join me in welcoming our panelists. And now I want to start with a very practical question, namely, how does AI work in your daily life? How do you work with it? What you do with it? And maybe also, how does it help you to be more creative, or where do you find that it actually limits your creativity? And maybe we can start with you, Ali, and then...
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. So my background is also technology, and I actually develop AI systems since many years. And for me, it's still very, very fascinating what an AI system that can compose music, for example, understand from music. And this is exactly my motivation, because we still don't know what music is and what human perception actually in that area is. And therefore, if you have a system that is able to compose music, that system must have understood something from the music that we still don't know. And for me, is this exploratory aspect very, very important. At the other hand, of course, I try to develop this system because I think as good as this as current state-of-the-art AI systems are, there are many, many unsolved problems. So when it comes to music and the artistic control, and to generate something new and not imitating only the past data, as it was also mentioned in the last panel. And so it's still a lot of work to do to research, to explore the potential of the AI. And because you mentioned my software Rector, which is a software that I started to develop at Ars Electronica Future Lab and continue also at the University for Music and Theater in Munich. So we work with artists, with students, just to find out what makes AI actually interesting for ongoing artists. And it's also a big question for itself. It's not a technological question, but it's the question of how to interact with the AI. And what I can tell you is already that if the system is very, very good at imitation, it's not interesting at all for the artists. So they really want to do something new with that system. So it's an artistic question of what kind of interfaces we need for that, what kind of systems we need for that, what kind of data we need for that. But at the same time, it's a technological question, because what kind of technology do we need for that? And all these things are unsolved yet, and it makes it actually interesting to explore the possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, as a professor, of course, I would like to ask you whether you can more easily educate AI than your students, but we will skip this question. It's just...
We can talk about this, of course, later, because, educating AI or, building your own systems or your own systems, perhaps is not the right word, to build your own model with AI, just to influence the output of the AI. It's kind of educating AI, and I think it would be the future of the AI and interaction with artists, because training an AI system in future, even now it's very, very easy, but in future it would be as easy as record a voice, recording something. So I think it would be something that would be part of the daily life of artists.
Let me start by saying that I'm very honored and happy to be here because I actually talk a lot on stages. However, I seem to be very often in the same bubble, and this is really outside of my comfort zone and a completely different bubble. So when I'm listening to the inputs, I get completely new ideas and perspectives that are completely outside of my scope and how I see things and the people see things whom I'm discussing with. And so with that said, let me start. So I've been working in the field of AI the last 6 years. That's when we actually started Women in AI. And back then, I have to confess that I already thought we were in the hype, because we had the first machines that could actually compose to a certain extent. And then also we had AI integrated in our lives through internet search, social media,
face, unlocking the phones with our faces and so on. So many applications that we've been using every day without being aware of using them. And basically that's machine learning. So basically the technology is called teaching the machine on how to learn. And then 2022, when ChatGPT was launched, something happened because suddenly the general public was interacting awarely with a system that was received as AI. And so the topic completely changed and the perception and interest around the topic completely changed. And so now how am I using AI? To be very honest with you, as a startup founder, you need to perform so many different tasks that are out of your field of expertise, from sales to marketing to many other tasks that you're creating content, that I'm actually heavily using these tools to make my life much easier. So, for example, I need to write sales scripts, and that's not something I've ever learned. So I can grasp the mainstream knowledge and basically try to adapt it to my tone of voice. So I have a specific Carina GPT and also a company GPT in my systems, which I trained on my tone of voice. And basically I can very easily create topics or papers in my tone of voice. Not research papers, just like, these informal papers or documents, let's call it documents. And I think what I said before also, I'm a keynote speaker, and I like to really have very or special openings, let's say. So I don't want to open with, hi, I'm Carina, that's the topic, so let's get started. So I like to think of really creative openings. And actually, I love brainstorming with this system. So what I do, I really go into these brainstorming processes, I think. And then what is really tricky to me is how to close again the keynote, how to basically build this storyline and get it to the closing, to just have the perfect, leave the audience with the perfect idea or call to action. And that's what I really enjoy doing with these systems as well. So I think they can really help me in this sense. To be fair, I need to produce a lot of resource in very little amount of time. And I think this is a bit the difference to what artists, or at least that's my perception, what artists do. They take the time to feel and to really dig deep and create step by step. So for me, I really just need to deliver very often. And for this, I think it's very helpful. But I think I never took any document that was produced and just copy-pasted it and used it as a final version. It was always a draft of just helping me getting ideas or being a bit more efficient. And so I think this what we can talk about later on, that's also where the boundaries are, because one thing is very clear. If we follow the GPS and we turn around in the tunnel, we are responsible. And it's the same when we use this generative AI tools, although I don't like the word tool, which we can talk about later as well. We are responsible for what we're creating, and that actually it represents the diversity and the world as we want to see it, as we have heard before as well.
Thank you. Yeah, also from my side, thank you very much. I was very happy to be part of such a great group, and always like getting so different perspectives, as you're talking also about Bubble. As a curator, I would say that one of the technologies that I use is very often language, and so I've been interested in LLMs. I got the opportunity to curate an exhibition together with ChatGPT. That was one of the first projects where I could really understand how GPTs work, and I was very grateful for that. That was in the beginning of 2023, when the mainstream would start being excited about those technologies, and when I got the invitation by the Francisco Carolinum in Linz and its digital format, I was first a little bit, okay, could be interesting. What concept, what can I myself expect from that? And for me, the process was actually quite interesting. To learn about the tool per se, to learn about the technology, and understand it also in my own curatorial practice. And I have to say, this book just came out last week, and I didn't touch it since then. And reading it 2 years afterwards already shows how much development was going on. And it's for me really this kind of like time capsule in a way. And so I think that was quite interesting. After that, a lot of other exhibitions followed, and I could already relate very much also to what Clemens Apprich said. I think learning with the machines is really a wonderful concept, and something that we need to take very seriously, not only being an institution, but also having our own practice, be it as a curator, as an artist. Claudia Lacher, who you also mentioned and who is here. I appreciate also her artistic approach very much, really having this very strong research behind it, really trying to understand the technology, understand the data sets, and this is also a direction in which you go so much. And we had the opportunity to do an exhibition together as well. Also this artistic curatorial practice for me was very interesting. And even being a little bit playful and not only using the GPT from my side, but we took the first evening when we sat in South Africa preparing the exhibition to compose a soundtrack using AI. And being critical about it, but also trying the tools and ground it in research and learn the tools ourselves and create this kind of literacy is something that is also very dear to me. And I think this is how I give the word to you.
Thank you. Really happy to be here with you all and you. I think I'm a new media artist, and for me the interest was always in exploring the technologies. So in 2021, I've been starting working with GANs for generating experimental videos, but then I start questioning, but can we go further? Can we actually generate movies? And back then, now everybody knows proprietary tools that you can use and try to generate short videos and so on, but back then there were really not much going on. So together with system architect Onur Olgac, we started researching a lot and experimenting a lot on creating workflows, and we figure out open source workflows that we custom build and we run locally in our machines. And that it was really, for me, it was unique. It was really an experience that made me understand how these tools work, but also how important is artistic direction when we work with AI. And often when I talk about generating movies with AI, in collaborations with AI systems, people just think about prompting. But prompting is just like really a little part of it. And there are so many different workflows, and back then nothing was automated. So we had different algorithms that we had to use for the creations of the frames in a way that they looked consistent. And then there was the upscaling, the RIFE, that back then there was just a research paper and we actually implemented from there. So it was, for me, I think the best part is it's more like the explorations and to see what it's possible to do. So from a technical perspective, and of course also from an artistical perspective and aesthetically, is also was interesting to fine-tune our own models. We were using, connecting to the previous discussion, open data, and which also ethically there are also problems when we talk about open data sets and so on. But I think it was for me a really unique experience that I will never forget, and I'm still working. I mean, it feels like it's over, but I'm still working in this way. I'm still, we are still developing open source workflows, but everything goes so fast, and somehow computational powers is never enough. And but at the same time, for me, proprietary tools are just not interesting, because if I cannot manipulate as much as I want, and if I have just to go down to just prompting, which there are also different ways of prompting, like from positive prompt, negative prompt, prompt scheduling, which is normally my favorite way also to work on it. It just becomes really, I think, from an artistic perspective, very boring. And another last point, I think it's really important to understand that AI per se, like AI system per se, they don't generate art. Like, you always need artistic and human direction, human input. And yes, it is easy to just prompt maybe one sentence, but the result then, and then we can open a conversation about slop maybe at the end, but the result then it's like the so-called slop. So yes, this collaboration is very important. It's nice to have also this machinic vision with which is always like a percentage of this randomness, and you have to let it go. Sometimes you can't control everything, but you can actually control part of the creation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think you already offered us many examples of how collaboration works in practice in your work, and I would like to stick with this point. It's not just about prompting, but there is much more. And thinking about, for example, using AI as a critical tool, or using AI to open up perspective, for example, at the SIVA Festival to thematize other perspectives, especially around non-Western perspectives, or with Richard Carr. How do you deal with ethical concern, for example, in this interaction? I mean, how can you maybe tell us something more about using AI as a critical tool?
Should I start? Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, in my curatorial practice, it's very important to hear many voices and also connect them somehow. I thought I would bring some examples also from exhibitions I did, or from the research that I did. Clemens already pointed it out, facial recognition, for example. Joy Bulamwini did wonderful research on that in her Unmasking AI project, or Kate Crawford was here in the course of Vienna Digital Cultures Festival a few months ago, and she, together with a group of people, is talking about infrastructure, about exploitation of both land and labor, human labor. Stephanie Dinkins, for example, who I had in my exhibition in Linz at Francisco Carolinum, was one of the first who would also work with a GPT, but in the form of a human robot. And as a Black American woman, also coming from Black studies, they would make the bias that is in the data sets so visible as well. Then Claudia Lach, I come back to her practice as well, as she, in her work, AI and the Art of Historical Reinterpretation, talks about unlearning history, about rewriting history. And I think talking about data and the data sets, it's so much also about the archives. What is visible, who decides what is visible, who decides what is in the data. And I think you had a conversation before also about curating the data somehow. And this is for me also a concept that I find quite interesting. Mimi Onuoha, who really talks about this as well in her missing dataset concept, or Caroline Sinder's feminist datasets. So there is really, really so many wonderful researchers and artists who deal with that. And I think connecting those and doing your own homework somehow as well is really what you can do. And just see the different voices, see really from which perspective do I use the tools, and curating data. I think this is really a thing.
And maybe since you mentioned the word feminism, I can't miss the chance to ask Carina, because as a co-founder of Women in AI Austria, you are very much engaged with this topic. So maybe you can also offer us some examples of how AI can serve women to get more visibility, for example.
Let me start with the critical part. So the reason why I don't like to say that AI is a tool is because we use AI systems, machine learning as systems that take decisions about our lives that have serious impacts. For example, who gets a job or who is invited for a job interview, who's not, who gets a loan, who doesn't, who gets a diagnosis correctly or who doesn't. This is again the data gap that is, for example, the Invisible Woman book from Perez. And so all these examples historically, so there are many, many examples, have shown us that artificial intelligence is not objective and not neutral. Because we, in Women in AI, we like to say it's rather than a tool, we like to see it as a mirror of our society, reflecting historical data, past data, making reflections and projecting decisions to the future. Best case, the situation as it is right now, taking the data from now. But this means we have our values, our biases, a historical dimension, a geographical dimension, as well as all the power dynamics reflected into the systems. And at this point, we also like to say that we think artificial intelligence is much more than a technology. We see it as a complex socio-technical system, meaning it cannot be isolated, or we cannot look at it in an isolated way. It's always integrated in the power dynamics, in the geography, time, and so on. And this has serious implications because, and one that I think is very beautiful, is that we cannot just leave it to one group in the society to design and define these rules or the systems to take decisions for our lives and shape the world we live in. It means we need a lot of diversity and interdisciplinarity to actually shape the systems in a way so that they can live up to the world we want to create. And so it's very important that all of us feel also empowered, that your voices matter, because we all are affected by the technology, so we all have a right to say something and how we want the technology in our lives. And going one step further now to the generative AI systems, which are now, that we are all talking about now for generating texts, images, videos. What I think is very important to understand is that we are currently mostly using US technology. So who here in the room is using European models to do their prompts or art or whatever? Who is using European models? So we see we have like, maybe, I don't see everyone, so maybe we have like 5 out of almost 100 probably. So we have here a big issue because these models that we are using, they are trained, especially the language models now, on English language. And language is a representation of culture and also of a point of view of the world. And at the same time, we also know that more than 30% of the world are not even represented in the internet. They don't have access to the internet. So everything we read about them has been written by someone else, eventually even with a colonist background, could be. And so we really know that these models do not reflect the reality or the world that suits us all, but they are shaping and creating the world we are living today. So we have a circle where technology is actively influencing what we get as results and how we see the world. And this is very important to have this discussion in Europe, because these models do not reflect our European values, our languages, our diversity, the same way as they don't reflect other regions of the world that are underrepresented. And so we really need to build this infrastructure. And so when I use these tools, actually I always also try to, stress the STEM to a certain extent. And I very often get very biased results. And I love those because, that's what I use in my talks to show how biased these models are. But for example, I just did a talk on the geopolitical setup and the AI race for, there's a race going on about who's going to be the AI super leader. And I wanted ChatGPT to create a starting line and having China, US, and Europe at the same line. It automatically had US in front and China and Europe in the back. And then I said, no, please, I really want you to just get them all started at the same point. There should be no one standing in front. It wasn't possible to create this image of having all three countries standing in the line. And I just recently asked, whom would you recommend as a female keynote speaker for AI in Austria? And it said, Sepp Hochreiter. So that's the answer you still get today. And so it's very important when we use these tools for image generation as for text generation to understand that there are values, points of views, and the representation of the internet and how the world is represented there in the answers we are actually getting delivered from the systems. And we need to make sure to not blindly trust them, but to have a very critical lens on this topic, and also share awareness that these things are happening, because people are not aware, actually. They take, and this is a huge problem, they take, many people think what comes out of these systems is objective reality, truth, whatsoever, but it's not at all. On the contrary, because I just want to make this clear, most of the bias comes through the data, but there is also bias within the models themselves. We can have biases on how we also evaluate the data. And then even if in theory we had a perfect AI system, which is impossible, we could then still, discriminate on the way how we apply the technology to certain groups and others not. So there is so many ways of where potential biases and then future discriminations come into these systems, which make it very complex to actually fix this issue. And this is why we all need to be very crucial when we are actually using these tools or systems, and also when we are affected by them, because it can really have an impact on our lives and how we see the world and how we shape the future.
Thank you. Do you want to?
May I say, sorry, I really don't want to take your time, but I have one example that fits very well, that we also got to know. It's Masakane, a South African project that deals with the language topic. And there is 11 languages in South Africa, and sign language, for example, is one of them. And it's a group of around 2,000 international researchers really creating data sets. And I just wanted to share this.
So for me, it's really interesting if people come together who use AI in daily life, because we really have the same language, I think. So many things have been said from you that are very familiar also to me. So I'm not going to repeat them, but just perhaps some comments to what have been said. So first of all, I think the biases and hallucination in AI is something that artists could love, even because it's actually the mirror of the society, and they can use AI to address them. It's very interesting as a project you mentioned, and also in my field, in the music, and with my cooperation or work with students, we had some projects where students address them the biases, the musical biases, even in the data set, the European Western music versus other kind of music, and what happens if an AI that is trained with this kind of music is conformed with, for example, other types of music, or the problem of gender biases in the operas, for example, in the old stories. This is one thing. The other thing that was said was about the autonomy, and the systems are able to decide by themselves, and if they are tools or not tools. I mean, I don't have an opinion, but we had the research about this with artists who work with AI, and I don't think that you can say which one it is. But the new thing is that if you use a tool, so usually you have the full control about the tool, because you have a full expectation. You have a very precise expectation. What would the consequences be of your actions if you use that tools? You want to apply a black-white filter, for example, on something, and then you actually can see even the result of that. But when it comes to creative systems, you can't really expect the result of that, because if you can exactly expect the result of a creative system, then that system wouldn't be creative, because then it's a tool. You can do it by yourself. So it means that if artists use AI, they have to accept some kind of autonomy that this system bring with themselves, and it led them to sign off as kind of negotiation with the system, with prompting, with using other tools to lead the system to a certain point, which is very interesting. I mean, it's a new kind of interaction with the system, and I think it's a very fascinating and very interesting how artists do that, because as an artist, you want to have the control, because you want to have something at the end of the day that you can say it's my work, but at the same time, you are using a system that can also decide by itself. So it's a very interesting situation, and I observed artists developing different strategies to do that, and they were very successful about that. So there will be ways, there will be standards even how to deal with this kind of autonomy and use the potential of the AI. And the last point, because of the data, I just want to add, we have to differ between the technology, which is the algorithm of AI, and what have been discovered in the last 60 years, which, by the way, a big part of that came from Europe, from the algorithm and the knowledge about how to use the tools, the mathematical tools. Even in diffusion models, for example, it was some years ago in Munich. So it's really very European, or a big part of it came from Europe. And then you have the models. This is the next part. The models are trained on data, which is actually what is available on internet. So if these models are not very European, it's because in Europe the data is not open access. So this is perhaps something. I mean, even if European model, even if a model is trained in Europe, the result would be very similar, because it's more about what kind of accessibility do we have about the data. Of course, it's a big discussion about copyright and what you are allowed to use and what not, but it's not about the technology and where it comes from. And the last point is the application. And the application is, of course, what kind of policies you have for this application. And the application depends on the company who launched the application. And it is also something completely different. Of course, they can also lead the content, or influence the answer, the data you can get. So there are different things, and I think every of these points could be a big discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Time is running very fast, so I
add just one point. I think one of the bases also for a good practice by working with AI is to use somehow more fair and trustworthy tool, open source workflows, and so on. Of course, not everybody has the technical knowledge to use them, so I totally understand also when artists approach proprietary tools. From my own artistic practice, which is I just want to bring my personal, because you already talked about the global and also general. I've always tried in my movie not to represent people, for instance, to avoid the problematics related to the bias. So everything, it's more like landscapes and spaces. And wait, I had another point.
Maybe it will come later. Before we open the discussion to the floor, because I believe there will be many other questions, but I do want to mention one point that seems very important to me, namely the invisible cost of AI. AI is perceived by many as a cheap technology because apparently in the moment you don't pay for it, but it has costs. It has big costs in terms of environmental costs and also in terms of the cost of production and the recognition and remuneration, for example, of artists and of knowledge. So the question would be, what role does it play in your work? I mean, what role do these concerns play?
I'll keep it now. I even remember what I wanted to say. I think I'm very aware, for instance, of the computational power that is required to work with generative AI. And even though when you work locally, it's still like problematics. I think what I bring, it's more like a perspective, like from the thematic of the movies, this thematic of human and non-human collaborations, but always set in a near future where nothing is left of organic life. And somehow we are collaborating together in order to find to live these last days together. And this is also brought up from a theory, the Novacine theory, from the ecology and scientist James Lovelock, that sees these collaborations between human and machine as a maybe the only way that we can somehow safeguard our planet. And I think, again, it's a bit like growing together and learning together, as also Apprich was saying, like humans and AI systems and machines in general. So it's really difficult to right now address possible solutions, because it's everything is going way faster than what I would have expected in 2021, and in the way things are taking their direction is not gonna look good in terms of neither ecologically, but also in terms of I think more not much of artist remunerations, but like humans in the loop and people that are like working to cleaning data sets and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. No, you want? Please. Okay. Yeah, just to add that, as you said, so I think that's actually a very interesting aspect also to what you just said. I think that art plays here a huge role. And for example, this brings me to a song which comes from the JKU in Linz, which was directed with the JKU, and it's from Asmo, Austrian rapper actually. And she has this song about the price, the environmental price of artificial intelligence. And it's called High AI, if someone wants to listen to it. And it also talks about the responsible use of not just, interacting without having any sense of interaction and so on. And I think this is the power of the arts also, to touch the feelings of human beings and change their perceptions and how they perceive topics or get awareness about topics in very different ways than going to school or reading an article or getting a lecture. And so I think that the arts play a big role in communicating the challenges that we still need to overcome in order to create this world where we coexist with AI in the way we want it, or with the tools and technology in general we want it, on the one hand. On the other hand, there is a big issue because, there is only as much as we can do as end users, but big tech is doing big investments, buying nuclear plants to make sure that they can basically run and compute and power their models, which is a big concern in the times where we want to have a positive impact. And on the other hand, AI can help us with a lot of also data we collect to be smart in energy usage, power grids, and so on. So there's a huge potential, but also a downside to it. And I think we still need to figure it out. But the other hidden cost, which I've not mentioned until now, with these generative systems, is that there is still a lot of human labor involved in these big large language models and generative systems in general. So it's not that we interact with them and then the information is fed directly, it's self-learning and it outputs again. So there is moderation on the input how the models are future trained. And then again, before we get the answers, there is still a human labeling part to make sure that the hate speech, discrimination, sexism that is on the internet is not reflected. So there is technical methods to do this, but also there's still human moderation. And this is mostly done, unfortunately, in countries that then again do not even have access to the technology, because they, mostly Kenya, Cambodia, again, by the rules of the American tech companies. And so I just think that this cannot be the end solution. So I hope for technological advancement in this directions where we come to smaller models, more regional, reflecting more diversity, less than having these huge systems that are shipping information around the world and consuming so much energy and also coming at such a high human cost.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think it's time now to open the floor and to collect questions. I will give precedence to a group of students who are here, who are also, who are taking part in this event as an interdisciplinary seminar, and then we will open up to the rest of the audience. So we will collect, I would say, 2-3 questions and then...
Thank you so much for the really fascinating discussion. My name is Lev Töpfer. I'm from the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. Walter Benjamin already raises the dissonance between technical reproduction and art, and I think this is even more extrapolated in AI. So my question to you would be, what role does authenticity or the concept of authenticity play in your practice and research when it comes to AI, and does it even really matter anymore?
Hi, my name's Elena. I'm also from the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. There's a lot of discussion around environmentalism and even, the environmental impact of AI. And what I'm curious about is the psychological effect of AI that doesn't seem to be discussed as much, from something as simple as how social media is framing the way that people look at even something as simple as body image, to something more extensive as like, how do we teach children about art moving forward with the digitalization that's happening? So I'm just curious about the psychological ideas around that.
Maybe one more.
Hi, my name is Henning. I'm also from the Diplomatic Academy. Thank you. You already talked about language and kind of the dominance of English language and maybe Western culture in general. I wanted to maybe dig a little bit deeper. If you look on a longer perspective at minority cultures or linguistic minorities, indigenous peoples, for example, do you think that AI can contribute to securing or safeguarding kind of the cultural diversity of also smaller cultures without turning into just a misrepresentation that was also mentioned here? Like, can we actually use AI to secure this cultural diversity?
Who wants to start?
I've been talking too much, so maybe I can start with the matter, yeah.
Speaking about like authenticity, and I think for me, now I talk a bit about my previous work. When I was not working with AI, I was working a lot with also appropriation. I was appropriating of online data and then making videos. And so for me, authenticity was never like the main interest. I think that even appropriating from data, then you can create something that is totally new and authentic. Then by working with AI, I realized that, of course, when you have access and you can create your own tools and then create your own parameters, it will always be unique and authentic somehow. What I've noticed that it's now maybe one of my concern, not really big concern, but it could be that it's somehow people, I realize when a person uses proprietary tools because I can tell that this is the aesthetic that this tool will have. So recently I watched a movie made with Midjourney, and I could tell immediately this is made with Midjourney, but just because you don't have all the possibility to somehow create your own workflows. So, but still, even with that, I think that artists are creative enough to play around with it and find solutions. So authenticity, I think it's always there. You just need to know how to master it and play with different tools that are maybe not just AI, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for those great questions. I even have the feeling that maybe the second and the third, I kind of like resonate in a similar way. Like you're talking about the psychological effects and, for example, a body image in social media, and then visibility of more marginalized groups maybe, and I think this is quite a tough one, as I sometimes lose hope very much when I look at social media. Also a huge backlash that we have, for example, in regards to body types, to all sorts of diversity issues. I don't want to compare them, but I think I would come back to the starting point of educating ourselves, of learning with the machines, learning how they work, and create communities around it. And I think different institutions like the UNESCO or the universities, or also us as people, or in being curators, being artists, hack the data and try to raise voices in the very moment that is possible. Maybe just also one other thing, and this is a little bit of an anecdote, but I thought it was quite interesting because at the Cyber Festival we were talking about quantum technologies this year, which seems to be maybe also another technological step that is coming up, that is discussed also when it comes to, for example, more sustainable technology, as this might be a way to have more computational power in much less time. And one of the questions in a panel discussion from the audience was also, do you think that quantum technology can save the world? This is a question that I also guess, as also Clemens, you pointed out, questions come again and again with all the technologies that are coming up. And maybe interesting to, train ourselves and see also what happened in the past.
I want to add quickly something about social media, because this was also part of my previous practice a lot, and I think it's in general like about also, we also talk a lot about educating ourselves, digital literacy, AI literacy, but I really believe this should not be on the end user. Like we should really not blame the user for not understanding like digital literacy in general, let alone AI literacy. But when it comes to social media, we also have to understand that there are, my voice is very loud, and we also have to understand that there are some sort of power dynamics. This is a sort of participatory surveillance, and basically we are introjected with some beliefs that are not even ours, but because you watch again and again the same things, then you started believing that this is your agenda. So we follow specific also routines just because we believe that these are the rituals that we have to follow. And somehow it's again a way to control, but with not with suppression or oppressions of the body, but through prevention. And I think the best it would really be to somehow
subvert this role. So how can we actually create new rituals that are going to subvert what is like the main narratives? How can we create counter narratives, not just like in the exhibition space, but also in this digital space, in the real space? And I think this is like the power of the art of creating speculation for the future of AI, but also maybe creating something that is more hyperstitional, that it's going to make it be real. This is what AI companies do normally. Like they start talking about a tool that they didn't even work on it, and I know because I saw how it works also from the inside. They are not ready for it, but they start making people believe that this is their last cutting-edge tool and this is going to be the future. So as artists, as cultural workers, we can do the same, but with other narratives that are more about maybe care rather than exploitation and disruption. And
thank you.
Despair. Thank you.
I think this addresses also the first question somehow. We'll get 3 more questions and then we'll...
It was one question, one more question. So I could answer that.
But yes, if you want.
Yeah, I will keep it very short. So your question was how the effect of AI would be on underrepresented data, right? So I think AI has a lot of potential, but for underrepresented data, it is very bad. So if we don't do anything, so it would be a real problem that because this data would be forgotten, and so it's important again to really differ between models, technology, and the applications. So we can fine-tune models with underrepresented data and make applications for that, so that it's represented again. But AI is very bad if something is underrepresented, unfortunately.
Hello, my name is Vincent. I'm also a student from the Diplomatic Academy. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I actually have 2 short questions specifically to Mr. Ali Nikrang in terms of music. I've recently come across a video of Pharrell Williams, a really influential artist in the last decade, who has, in his opinion, music has nowadays become really similar. So the new songs, because of all the production and how easy it has become to produce nowadays, so many songs sound the same in his opinion. And as an AI composer, I wanted to ask you if you think that AI might actually contradict Pharrell Williams in this, in producing new sounds that will then, as a consequence, produce new music. And the second question is always regarding music, is about copyright. For example, if tomorrow I want to produce a video on YouTube and I want to use a song, and I actually use a song that is completely AI created, do I have to pay copyright? And if yes, do I have to pay to who? Because I guess it's automated, made by AI, so it's not a single artist who has done it. Thank you.
Let's collect 2 other questions, and let's try to keep questions and answers as short as possible, because there are some other hands. Yes, I would like to, some other hands raised.
Thank you so much for this interesting panel. I'm Divine. I'm also from the Diplomatic Academy. The topic of digital literacy was mentioned, and we know that digital literacy, or literacy generally speaking, is not distributed equally. So my question is, how do we bridge the gap between exposure and understanding when it comes to AI? Because people in rural areas who have less or little education are exposed to AI, but how do we make sure that it doesn't become, this democratization of AI doesn't become deepening of informational inequality? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. One more? Yeah.
I'm Nicole, same crew, Diplomatic Academy, and I want to thank you for your presentation, because this is not only a relevant but very pressing issue, how we are defining, and the definition of artist is now evolving, and what is an artist. I want to touch about something that was mentioned in the other panel, but I think is relevant to this one, which is the so-called endangered degrees or disappearing degrees. Like graphic design, I want to bring the degree of medical illustration, because an example is the Kendall Hutt Publishing House, who is known to cut edges with their, I'm sick, where they don't hire medical illustrators anymore, but they do acknowledge that they use AI for their textbooks. And also maybe it's not related to art, but last week we had the issue with Deloitte, a very known consulting company, that they had to pay a substantial amount of money to the Australian government because they were hired to write a report on wellness, and they use AI, and a researcher catch this report using AI, and there were many, many inaccuracies on this. So maybe as my comment is that maybe the jobs for humans are not going to disappear, but they are going to be reduced, and we're going to live with more reviewers rather than creators. Thank you.
All right, big questions. Who would like to start? Ali.
I can start with a music question. I mean, it has something to do with the nature of the AI because it's a statistical machine, and it's a wonderful thing that millions of people have access to composition, first access to composition. But of course, the mainstream data or the average music would win always because it's a statistical machine. Of course, as an artist, you have a lot of possibilities. Starting by prompting, but prompting is not enough by far. But starting by prompting, let's say you have different possibilities to add individuality bits until authenticity, which is very, very important. But the most of the people, I don't think that they do that. So the most of the people, they just want to have fun and to share something in social media. And perhaps it is the reason why you have the perception that everything gets similar, because if you don't control the AI, if you don't lead it to or negotiate with it and lead it to a certain point, it will generate something that is very average or very similar, perhaps depend on what it has been trained. The second question is, of course, a question. I'm not an expert in that because it's about the law and what you can use or not. So I would recommend to read the policy of the software you are using. In my opinion, it's just now it's a gray area. I mean, there are two different things: the ethical point of view, because these models are trained on copyrighted data, of course, and the other thing is about the law and who is responsible in case there is a problem with copyright, because it's a great area, because if you generate something especially very individual that is not similar to any of the existing data, I mean, so it's not really clear if it would be a problem or not. So I don't think that from the perspective of law it would be a problem, but from the ethical point of view, of course, it's a different thing. So I would recommend just to read how the policies are.
Just to pick up on that, so I'm not a copyright lawyer, but as far as I know, the providers, they cannot guarantee you that you're not violating rights, because this is how the technology works. It generates based on the training material, and that's how artists or authors also found out that the works were used, because they asked, can you give me quotes of my book? And it could give these quotes, right? So they must have been in there. And then the question was, how did they acquire them? And there's big law cases around it, so but it's very unclear. But in general, in the terms, many licenses, they are, when you pay for them, you're allowed to use them commercially, but no one can guarantee you that you're not violating rights of others in this context. So it's a bit tricky. And then to the other questions, I would like to actually come to the AI literacy one, which is the topic at my heart. So this is basically what we do in our startup as well. So we have an AI compliance platform, which helps to develop and deploy AI alongside the law and ethics. But we believe that's not enough. You need this literacy part for many different reasons. So on the one hand, now in Europe, it's obligatory to train as organizations, everyone in the organization who is interacting with AI systems. So this is in the EU AI Act on the one hand. But then on the other hand, AI literacy goes way beyond how does AI work and how to use a tool. It goes about all these ethical and legal questions about the fundamentals of ourselves. What is authenticity? What does it do to us? What decisions do we take now as a society? And this actually shows the importance, because we are now in a transformation, like with many other technologies. So it's really important to also address fears, which is the other question also about, as far as I understood, the future of jobs and how we need or will we have which jobs will exist in the future, how they are transforming, and jobs are transforming. And so it's very important to already find now how to move in different directions. And just to give you an example of my bubble, so for example, we do this training to become an AI compliance officer. This did not exist 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, the Institute for Internal Revision in Austria said, can you offer this course for us? And so now we've been doing it 5 times. Or AI manager. And so just in my bubble, AI ethics assessor, someone who's analyzing the models, data sets on biases and making sure they're complying with ethical standards. AI value-based engineer. So there's completely new roles emerging with a lot of new opportunities, but we really need to show these opportunities and take people also basically by the hand and help them. And unfortunately, from my practice, what I see as someone who's training entire workforces, this is not how companies are living this at the moment. They are more looking for compliance checks. So what they want is a short video, best case very cheap or free, and then someone who just makes a tick that everyone was just had like a basic training and we're legally fine, kind of. And so I think it's very sad because organizations really should leverage this power of investing into their people and also finding these new directions and taking us or the workforce with them.
So we are back to the point education, which has been mentioned also before. We have more questions on the back.
Yes, education is a good word. My name is Tina Lasch. I'm representing an NGO, Die Schweigende Mehrheit. We're a Künstlerkollektiv, and we've done workshops, theater and film workshops with more than 5,000 young people in Austria in the last a couple of the last years, and we talk with them about their social media experiences, and shortly said most of the young people watch TikTok and none of them reads newspapers, so we have a generation who is not getting any information which is elaborated by journalists as long as they don't appear on their social media account. We have really reconstructed that most of the young people saw the killing of Kirk live. They saw the killing of Valeria Marquez, all the girls who were on a beauty bubble. And really, most of them saw fake videos about the attentat in Graz. And I've met the last year 3 teachers who have a TikTok account. So we have really this education doesn't work at all because the teachers and the parents have absolutely no idea of what the kids are seeing and what they're seeing on the social media, very few do things themselves. Most of them just see this TikTok or Insta things. And I think it's really absurd to talk about this idea that people could collaborate on an equal level with the machines because there are algorithms. It's Chinese or it's US American. The algorithms are in favor of right-wing content. It's not because the right wing are better, but because intrinsic.
I think we are shifting now to the topic of the social media, which is slightly a different
I just want to share this because it's about digital education was the moment. And I see on the schools there is digitale Grundbildung and it's about Excel and about how to deal with Word. It's not about knowing what the algorithms do. And I think we are living in a digital feudalism and we have kids who are really getting lost in a way you cannot imagine if you don't see them. And we really did these workshops all over Austria. And yes, I just want to say we have make a petition on Aufstehen.at, which is pleading for TikTok Verbot and for measures to do digital education really not in this fine bubble of art, but in the Mittelschulen and the Dorfschulen.
There is another question here. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Alia, and my question is also directed to Clemens as well, because he talked about education. So I'm doing a PhD in education, and we talked a lot about AI not just being a tool, but being a co-author, co-collaborator, co-composer, and everything. Does that mean that Gen AI has a social agency, that Gen AI has enough social agency to actually produce new knowledge and to contribute to knowledge production in society? That's my question. Thank you.
I think we can take another one because the first was more a comment than a question. So if there is another there, I see one hand raised there.
Hello, I'm David Leubel from ÖAD. It's a funding organization, and I have also a big question, which I hope still allows for a quick answer. I'm seeing more and more creations where there's an asterisk created without AI, and I'm wondering if we are moving toward like that kind of paradigm where it's like AI free created or with a labeling system. Do you think that might happen? In which areas maybe? And what would that mean for artists who use AI in a creative way instead of just employing it to streamline or to replace?
So, I mean, I think the first comment also about TikTok, of course, TikTok is also involved with AI. I mean, there are recommender systems, and of course, we have we are in our echo chambers, and we tend to see always the same content, and these reinforce some beliefs. So, of course, like you're right when you say that you are also concerned about this. And again, there are also some sort of agendas that they go on from, like, I mean, TikTok, it's more controlled by the US, Douyin is more the Chinese part, but yeah, definitely I understand the concern also for the, but I mean, isn't it also journalism somehow controlled? So, I mean, but let's not enter that realm. I think the second question was for Clemens, no? Was more directed, okay, to everybody, but I want to leave it to, I don't know. What was the second question?
It was about education.
About the agent, no, but also like about the agency, right? Because yeah, because I think like this is actually is a good point, because I think that even like tech companies somehow they tend to put the agency to the AI, to the machine, whereas there is no agency at all right now, and they do that because they want to somehow shift the responsibility that they have. So right now, machine has no agency. That's my very straightforward answer to this. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the future, we'll see.
Maybe just to the question of knowledge. I think it's a bit that I think all the questions, by the way, are very interesting questions. So what I observe is that people do not, or how users now use these generative AI tools or language models instead of the internet, instead of going on Google or other platforms and doing a Google search. You basically ask the miracle for getting information. And what I find is very problematic with this is that you know, we don't, these are very complex models. So we have hundreds of billions of parameters that are linked through neural networks where they are running through, and it's very hard to actually understand the way that this information is created. So the explanation, and this is the explainability gap that we have, and this is why we talk about black boxes in this context. And but what we know is that, for example, Mark Zuckerberg said when Trump was elected that he's going to change the parameters from being more democratic in more Republican style, basically. So this is a comment he made. And so we perceive this information that comes out kind of as the objective information, which it's not at all, because it comes from somewhere, it runs through a lot of different from the training material through the model to get to us. And what I'm very concerned about is what, for example, Meta just now also launched, which is in the US, not in Europe, which is that now based on our interaction with, for example, the chatbots we have in Facebook, Instagram, but also in our WhatsApp, they are selling you products. So if you are actually interacting about or asking about where would I do a hike, this could be interesting to a company who sells hiking shoes. So they're gonna place, but it could also be for medical issues and so on. So I am what I'm also very concerned about is that currently there is this big lawsuits between the tech giants that are putting out these models and the publishing houses. And so now some of the publishing houses, they are settling deals with them and others are not. But what does this mean for the information we get out of these systems? Are some information of some publishing houses actually influencing the contents and are they not? Can they even separate? And also, what is the business model of the future of these systems? Because it has happened to me that it spit out, for example, consultancies that I can go to, or SEO is changing, so search engine optimization. How do we how do we get the traction in the future? And so there's a lot of unclear and open questions, and this is very dangerous in the way that we do not have authors anymore. In the web, we have a web page and someone's responsible for curating this web page. In this regard, we get information with sources, but what we have there doesn't have to be in the sources, and the sources don't have to exist, and there can be generated text which can be hallucinated. And so I think the way we are consuming information and knowledge is changing, and there is a big lack of education and also the discussion on how we as a society are actually evolving in this knowledge consumption phase. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's time now to come to the concluding part of the event, but the good news is that we have some time until 9 p.m. to stay here and to have more informal conversations. So if you still have questions or other issues you would like to discuss, stay with us a bit longer. And the smell of the food is already in the air. So I think it's a good way to conclude. I think that we have lots of thoughts that we can take with us tonight, and I found this panel so inspiring because it stimulated us to consider technology and AI not just as something that we should use, but actually something we should contribute to develop, and that art offers us the possibility to actually construct alternative visions of what we do with AI and with media and technology in general. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ali, Carina, Eva, and Sofia. Thank you all for participating. And I think let's continue this. Let's stay in these interstices. Thank you.
Thank you also from my side for Giulia Pelillo for the wonderful moderation. And thanks a lot from the Austrian Commission for UNESCO for coming. We're happy to invite you for a glass of wine or lemonade and some snacks. So please, we're committed to continue putting cultural rights at the center of this conversation. So let's stay in touch, let's connect and enjoy your evening. Thank you.